Hi, Caren. Welcome to GTM Expertise. Thanks for taking the time.
Hi, Ben. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So before we get into the kind of main topic of pricing and packaging, which is really a top topic for a lot of startup founders these days as they're going out on their journey, it'd be great to hear a bit about your journey, how you got started and kind of what are you up to now?
Sure. So I am co-founder and CEO of AgendaHero. AgendaHero is an AI platform for eliminating manual calendar work. And before that, I was EVP and GM of the enterprise business at Brightcove, which I joined before we had our first paying customer and before the product was ready. So I was very, very lucky to be one of the first dozen people at the company, and there from, pre-revenue all the way to a global public company.
That's amazing. So I think we've got a lot to kind of dig into there, particularly as you've done a kind of a long journey with a company that went through IPO and beyond and really a global platform that was well used by lots. And now you've gone back to kind of starting from zero. And so there's a lot to pick there, I think, especially around pricing and packaging, which I'm sure you had a hand in. So let's go back to pre that first paying customer at Brightcove. So the product was getting built. You had no customers whatsoever to talk to. No one paying money to exchange value. No customer references, which we all love to use in our sales processes. So like what sort of take me back to that bit and how did that actually come about? Like was it today we're going to go and get a paying customer, or was it more like knocking on the door saying we really want that? Like how did that go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it was a definite intentional pursuit to go and get that first customer. I got to work with the amazing Elizabeth Bentel Carpenter, who was leading the pursuit of getting our first paying customer. And really, it was finding the people who were willing to take a leap, right? The interesting thing about getting that first customer is you're building this thing that you know the world will love, but it doesn't yet exist. And so you're asking people to imagine a future that could be possible. And it turns out that's actually a really rare skill. Like a lot of people cannot imagine what doesn't yet exist. And so even if you find someone that is going to benefit from your product, you also have to find someone who is comfortable taking a leap. And so just kind of keep that in mind as you're knocking on doors and trying to get feedback, as there's a lot that comes into that first yes. And so it took a lot of at bats. It took a lot of calling people up and showing them this vision and having conversations and getting feedback and testing pricing conceptually. Would you pay for this? Okay, great. What do you think it would be worth, right? And sort of like a lot of interviewing and just discovery, and
Mm.
then trying to figure out, we can go into this too, like the actual pricing model, like okay, so we know that roughly we believe we can sell this for X, but how are we going to like put this into a contract? So there's a lot of pieces that we can dive into, Ben, but I would say, find your early believers, find the people who are comfortable taking that leap and saying, yes, I see this vision and I want to be part of it.
There is a type of person that you're selling to there that definitely you put them on I guess traditional early adopter kind of curve. If you look at a product life cycle or similar, who they're definitely like there's definitely a lot of people you couldn't do that with. It's probably the easiest way of sort of splitting them up because they're not willing to take that leap. They're kind of like looking for a comparator, and in this case, and in many cases, there isn't a comparator because you're creating a new category, you're creating a new environment, and so I guess so that trust relationship, I guess that you built that first few customers would have been extremely strong to be able to pull them along for the ride and pay for it. So how did that feel when you got that first customer? So I guess there's a lot of momentum building up to that first customer. Then there's a yes.
Then there's a yes.
Then what? Then what happens?
It is the literal best feeling in the world. I mean, I remember Elizabeth just like running through the hallways with the contract in her hand, and like it was really just a lot of perseverance and optimism and just continuing at it. So a couple of the elements that came together were, really trying to convey this vision of what's possible. And you're right, like this idea. Now we're going back, right? We're going back before YouTube was even a thing, and trying to convince people that you could have this platform where people would watch television on their computer or watch video on their computer. And it wasn't yet built, so you couldn't like show it and say, hey, here it is. So it was a lot of sort of demos conceptually while you're sort of building that that commitment simultaneously in parallel. So but when you finally got that, yes, I mean there's a startup, as there's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs. It's a roller coaster that can be within 5 minutes in the same day. But there is nothing better than getting that first customer saying, yes, we will go with you and we will pay for what you're building and we're going to sign this contract. So that's an awesome moment of any startup.
That's amazing. Great story. So like when you walk through those pricing kind of conversations you're having in the early stages, you mentioned, you got to work out, I guess, first of all, who you're selling to and kind of what level. And I think we can get into that in a minute, the kind of the model in those early days where you were selling to a type of customer. Did you then sort of rinse and repeat that process? Did you feel like you really nailed that first customer and therefore let's try and replicate sort of similar types of targets? Like how did that go after that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think, so first of all, it depends on the market that you're going after, right? So if you're going after mass consumer market where the pricing is online and you're doing self-service adoption, that's very different than if you're going after enterprise customers. And in the early days, I would say getting your first yes is too early to rinse and repeat at scale. There's a lot that you're learning in that process, and what may have worked for that one person may be scalable, but it might not be. So again, we're talking about those people who, one, are in a position to say yes, they have budget, they're entrepreneurial by nature, which means that they don't fit a mold. And so you're not necessarily ready to mold the process after the one yes. But when you get to the second and the third, and you're sharing that same, like deal parameters, like this is how we price, the contract that we're going to. And if the second person says, oh yeah, that makes sense, great. Okay, now we're learning something. But if they're like, back in the early days of Breakout, we were trying to figure out like what we would even base the pricing on. And all of this was new. And so, some of those early customers were insisting that it had to be priced a certain way, but that was because of their internal approval. So like we needed to like translate our vision into what would get a yes. And then the next customer is like, what is this? This makes no sense. Right. And so it's, I do think that there are some commonalities, like generally speaking, the amount that people will pay is probably going to be something that you get consistency early on in terms of your first target market. I will come back to that because I say like early on, then you can expand up or down from there and sideways. But the, sort of like what people are actually paying for. I guess the one thing I would say, the one thing I've learned, because I've done a lot of pricing in my career, from the very first customer you get to expanding markets, is your pricing will change. And so you should really be comfortable knowing that it is not something that you have to hold on to for years. It should evolve as the market evolves, as your product evolves, as the competition evolves. And so do your best for in the moment, but be flexible in your mindset that you will be changing it.
And I think customers are reasonably savvy these days to understand those changes, right? There's a lot of external factors to the pricing. There's internal factors. There's, like you mentioned, competition coming in, and there are so many different ways to price. Let's talk like B2B SaaS. So it's kind of framed in that way. You can measure it on all sorts of different parameters. And like you mentioned, you start with this idea that it's going to be measured like this, but then a lot of other customers give you potentially better ideas, which is great when you get some feedback from a customer like that and you can change that. One of my sort of thoughts there is, if I'm a startup founder, I'm thinking about my costs, right? Because one of the external things is like, will the market accept it? But if the market accepts it at this price, and I sort of then reverse engineer, if you like, top down to where my costs are, like my costs in the early days are going to be all over the map because you're not at a scaled way. So how do you take that like leap of faith in, you can close as many unknowns as you can, but I'm sure there are times you went out with pricing to the market where you didn't really have the full picture because you just can't. Like, how do you get that confidence, or where's the okay part of that if you're a founder?
Yeah, so this was actually something that was very hotly debated in the early days of Brightcove, because at the time everything was expensive. The costs of sale, just even bandwidth and streaming and even storage at the time was actually could be cost prohibitive when we're talking about like the massive video files of major movies, right? Like they were expensive.
Mm.
This is where you, as an entrepreneur, have to be an entrepreneur in pricing and packaging. Because earlier I said, a lot of people really, it is a rare skill. I did not realize until being an entrepreneur how rare imagining, or being a true startup founder, like how rare imagining the future is, because it's just something that I've always done. I've always been sort of the entrepreneur inside companies and always thought, but many people can't actually predict what's going to happen, or even think about what's going to happen. So sometimes when you're pricing, this sort of cost becomes a fear, and it actually can like stop you from doing the right experimentation, because you're thinking, if let's say I price this contract at $20,000, but it's actually going to cost me, $20,000. And so I'm not going to make a profit. Okay. But what about next year? What about the year after? So if you price it at 20,000 and now because the costs are coming down, it goes to 2,000, right? That's a very different story.
Yep.
And like, we're seeing this with AI too, right? Like when AI first came out, it was so expensive. But I just remember those days at Brightcove. I was like, don't worry about it. It's going to get cheaper. Like it will get cheaper. And so, you should obviously like not intentionally price your product so that you will lose money, but be entrepreneurial in sort of where you're going, and don't worry so much about the unit economics of the first deal, right? You're learning, like really, Ben, like that's what you're doing is like all of these early days, all of these early deals in the early days are essentially throwaway in the end, right? Like you're going to have thousands of customers. And so if you get a few that are not exactly right, it's okay. But the learning is priceless.
That's really good. I like that bit about thinking about learning in your early customers. And your early customers, as much as you're fond of them and you like them and they took that leap with you, I think if you map that 5-10 years forward, you might find that cohort's completely changed and gone out. And actually, because of the journey you're going on, right? And so they've been really, really great at like giving you real time feedback and the early adoption, but perhaps they're not the customer for the 10 years, but that's okay because you've kind of used them for mutual value. In that case, they've got value out of something that they could get a potentially competitive advantage in their market because they're the first to the market with that, and they can take a ride with you and vice versa. So I think that's really cool. I like that.
Yeah, and on that note, like many of them actually evolve with you, right? And so
Right.
like they know that they're taking that leap, and that I do think it is important to set expectations. And so I think if you're going to a new market, unless you're doing like online pricing, right? And if you're going to launch, which we did at Brightcove, a down market price point, you want to even then you can change it, but you want to sort of know that that's sort of like out there and it's public, and you're going to get a pretty big sized adoption if you're going to that pricing. And so changing it is a little harder, but for enterprise deals, even your customers, like they expect you to change. And so I think it's important for you to tell the team. So like as a founder and you have this team around you and they might not know pricing and packaging, I think it's important for you to tell the team like, hey everyone, these are going to be our first deals, but pricing will change. The packaging of what's included in this will change. So especially on the engineering side, where you actually have to you have a list of features that's going to go in package A and a list of features for package B, you don't want you want the team to know that that is likely going to shift around so that they're able to build something that's flexible too, right? The sort of setting expectations, I think, is, as we've learned, is like one of the most important things in life. Setting expectations with your customer, like, hey, this is our pricing now, it might evolve, great. Setting expectations internally, like, team, this is our first pricing, but I promise you it's going to change. It will actually give the team the context for when it does change, because it will, for them to understand that that's okay and that's part of the process.
Yeah, and I think I can think of maybe a tangible example there where what you don't want to happen is the team build this awesome platform, but you've got no way of segmenting the access to that to different price models. And they're like, oh yeah, we never thought that that would ever change, and everyone would get that feature or whatever it was. And I can just hear that now, and you can just imagine how that conversation goes. And it's like it's a lot harder to reverse that rather than start with the plan to build with this kind of modular access to features and functions, so that you can adapt to those different markets. So you mentioned down market there. I'm really interested because I think that frames a good kind of next point on packaging and how you might package up what you've built as this platform. And let's say you get in the middle of the market in at the start of your journey, and then there's a decision internally to look at this volume or sort of large group of customers paying a lot smaller. They're going to be a little bit more, well, a lot more price sensitive as a cohort, right? In general, like, how do you even turn your team to that? Like, there's a lot to think about there. What's the rationale there for going after that market? And then second, how do you orientate the team?
Yeah. So the rationale for going after the market is that you see the opportunity. There needs to be some sort of evidence, whether it's your own conviction, and that's also okay, right? Like, we are founders and we see a world that hasn't caught up with the rest of the world yet. And so sometimes even just like knowing that this is where the company needs to go is enough. Like, that is evidence, the founder's conviction. And sometimes it's the market. Sometimes it's the market saying, I love your product, but I can't afford it. And then you have this interesting question, which is, okay, well, do we want to expand the market and cannibalize some sales on the enterprise side? Or do we want to expand the market because it will broaden the adoption of the entire company and lift all the revenue? And so it is not an easy decision. I know this is one of the biggest struggles that companies selling into an enterprise have, which is, do you start down market and go up? Do you start up and go down? And it's I can tell you it's also pretty tense for like the sales teams who this is assuming you already have some customers. But if you have that evidence, you owe it to yourself to explore, what is the market telling you? And could there be an offering that complements the other? Could there be a down market offering that complements the enterprise, and vice versa? And what is the cost of this? And I think we overestimate the cannibalization of the two markets, because most people are buying what they believe they should be paying and buying for your product based on their own budget and needs. And so oftentimes the same foundation product, you should not sell the same product for different prices, but the core of what you're doing, a small piece of that might be perfectly useful for someone paying $99 a month. And then the sophisticated features on top might justify someone paying $100,000 or more a year. And those two worlds, if you do it right, can actually live together, but it's not easy. The hardest part of all this, and then we can go to like, if you are going down market, how do you do the pricing research for it? But the hardest part of this, I would say, is positioning your company. Like, does this actually make sense? Who are we selling to? Are we selling to big media companies or enterprises, or are we selling to small businesses? And so I think that if you're like, if you can combine this and you're saying, no, we're selling to enterprises or media companies, they might start small, but they'll
Mm,
grow big. Then
mm,
you have a winning recipe because
mm.
you're selling to the same market, but you're giving them different on ramps, and that's great. And then the second part is just focus internally, like where are the resources going to? And that one, I mean, that's like every founder's everyday question. I only have so much time. My team only has so much focus. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
the resource allocation for it's quite hard. I've seen this in some startups as well when it's really about sort of deal size as well, right? And sort of focusing on where your sales teams, in this case, in a volume play, maybe very much kind of out of the picture and not lean in, lean forward. A lot of automation these days, which is a lot easier. A lot of kind of light touch to ensure that you get that volume kind of experience, but it's completely different mindset, and you can't approach an enterprise deal in the same way you can approach that down market deal for sure. So, but you talked a little bit just then about how you do the pricing research for that, because that must be kind of strange if you're perceived in the market as a mid or enterprise market company, and you start doing research about maybe we're going to do a $50 to $100 plan, and like how do you even start that process?
Yeah. So I think this is probably the time when more upfront research is helpful because you can't just do deal by deal over the phone.
Mhm.
And so, but I think the great part of it is because it's a mass market, you have more people to talk with. And
Mhm.
so, if you already have a product in market and you're seeing demand for a lower price point, every time you lose a sale, that's another person you can survey and talk with.
Mhm.
So, I would start with the market that you're seeing, the market's evolving. What is it telling you? So, you can do surveys. You can do surveys to your own leads. You can do surveys. You can sort of go outside of your own lead base of customers that look like that. I personally like the one question survey. So, like, if and then you describe your product was
Yeah.
available, would you pay? And you give them four options: price one, price two, price three. I would not pay for this. And then I've just found if you make it easy for people, if you give them a long survey, it's like,
Yeah.
who's going to answer that, right? You're going to
Yeah.
get biased answers. But if you
Yeah.
give a one question survey, you're going to get a lot of data. And so then you'll start to see like, okay, wow, like you can actually build a supply demand curve. You can say like, or a price demand curve, I should say. You can say like, wow, like, okay, this is what it netted out with our survey. And if we do the math, like this is what the revenue could be. And then the most important thing that I love is following up and saying, okay, we'll give it to you. You give them a one-page insertion order and you say, we're going to give you this product at the price you said. And then you validate whether they buy or not. And if they do, then you've got your
Brilliant.
market. And if they don't, then you've learned before you've invested months into or
Yeah.
weeks or months into building it.
That's awesome. I love that. That's a great tip. The that process kind of it sounds like a process you would want to do after you've got so you wouldn't want to do these things in parallel maybe like let's go back to that original journey. You start your platform and you get the platform, then you decide to go down market. I would imagine it's just too many things to take on to
Yeah.
try and do both at the same time, right? As you talked about, founders have very limited resources anyway, right? You've already got a platform that you can kind of slice and dice a bit to offer over here. That's a heck of a lot easier and a solid base. You probably have revenue to support the team going to do that too, which is always helpful, right? I can imagine that's probably what a founder's thinking.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's talk a little bit more about AgendaHero, because I know that now you've wrapped up this like large and wonderful journey with Brightcove, and now you've spent some time in AgendaHero, and you're going from zero. So you have a lot of experience coming out of what you've been doing, but kind of wrapping that up into like entrepreneur and founder mode from scratch and from zero. What are the how do you even start sort of using the lessons that you've learned, and like what share with me some stories, because I think there's a lot of founders out there who would love to hear how it's gone from on that journey. Everyone starts their entrepreneur journey in different ways, but what have you learned very quickly? What were the early foundings and learnings, I guess, in starting Agenda Hero?
Thanks for asking, Ben. I would say the number one lesson I took from Bright Cove that I use at Agenda Hero is just the ability to adapt,
Mm.
right? So starting a company is hard, right? Like
Mm.
we don't sign up for easy. It is not easy, but it is also one of the most rewarding things I have ever done in my entire life, not just in my career, but in my life, to build something from nothing but an idea, like a true blank piece of paper where everything is ambiguous, and to define it and to create it and then to have a stranger use it
Mm.
and then to have someone pay for it. It's just like there is nothing more rewarding to be able to bring this change that you see in the world and then other people benefiting from that change. But the ability to adapt, right, as you're learning is just probably the most important skill that any entrepreneur can have, because things around you will change. I mean, we started building right before AI came
Mm.
to market. We actually wanted to build something that is now possible with AI. That's what I had always imagined, but I
Yeah.
kept being told like, it's not possible. It's not possible. We have to find a way to make this possible. And so the minute that AI showed up, I mean, we instantly incorporated into the foundation product that we were building. And so you just have to know that the path is not straight,
Mm.
that it is often crooked, but you just kind of need to keep making the best decisions that you can each day. And so I would say, yeah, the ability to adapt is every entrepreneur's superpower, while simultaneously holding space for conviction, right? So you can stay convicted, but just adapt how you're going to get to the top of the mountain.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for you, with your sort of strong go-to-market experience from prior, how has that helped you shape Agenda Hero's go-to-market? And like, I'm thinking as well with, quite a number of years has passed now since when you last kind of started out that product journey with Brightcove, like the tools and the kind of automation and the capability out there to help you with your go-to-market strategy. How are you wrangling those from a go to market for Agenda Hero to go to market? How do you pull all those things together?
Yeah, so the tools definitely have changed. I mean, I remember I was at Brightcove in the early days where this idea of marketing automation platform was
Mm-hmm.
introduced. So we were doing manual emails, and like the tool set is just incredible now, and it continues to evolve. And with AI, it's even better. I would say the core principles, though, of just being genuine and being
Mm.
curious and talking to people who should be benefiting from your product, that has not changed. And so being able to do it at a larger scale
Mm.
has. And
Mm.
so my advice to founders is just to be authentic to your vision, your mission, what you believe, and use the tools to be able to do that at scale. But don't outsource your message. Own that, what you're going to say and who you're trying to say it to, and use the tools to help you do that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that rings true a lot. What I'm seeing in the market today is frankly, you can automate a company from
Yeah.
from scratch if you wanted to, right? And I think it's important, and this is why we do GTM expertise. To be honest, is to be able to get the real human stories of, and that's not disappeared, right? The human to human connection in their sales process, the authentic nature of bringing to market something new that's going to be revolutionary that someone might bite on. All of that needs a human and genuine and authentic way of doing it. And I think it's important for the founders not to forget that bit and to focus on the principles of selling, which again haven't really changed. They come in different tools maybe these days, but I think keeping that core is very important. Like you're saying, don't outsource your messaging, don't outsource your real core point of difference that you have. And I think that's really, really true. Like to finish on maybe then, what is another tip that you can share with a founder who's starting out with a from scratch sort of idea? Your this idea in Agenda Hero, to me, when I saw it, was totally in its own sector and segment, to talk about category creation kind of areas, right? Where it's really there's no comparator, and so you've had to go out and sort of start to say, well, that problem that you have with, tell me more about that, and maybe there's a solve for it. Like if you're in that kind of function and found in sort of sector where you're not coming into a crowded marketplace, where you're creating your own Like, what are the other things you could share with a founder today?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest thing I've learned or in then sort of those early conversations is like you are so excited about what you're building, but a lot of it's in your head, right? Well, now actually you can get it on paper pretty quickly with
Sure.
AI, which is awesome. But still that like leap of faith for people to sort of say, yes, that's amazing, and actually want to use it is I think a lot of founders sort of put too much weight into external validation at the really, really early stage when they're asking their friends and family to validate this idea that they have in their mind when those people just might not like be in that space for adopting that thing. But if you find the people that you might not know who actually have the problem, and then they hear what you're doing and they light
Mm,
up and tell you 100 reasons why this needs to exist, that is the most motivating thing in the world. And so, my advice to founders or to anyone wanting to start something is don't discount an idea because of friends and family feedback.
mm,
Go and find your one believer. Go and find someone who actually will benefit from what you're building, and then find the second one and the third one. And so, even today, my absolute favorite part of this journey is talking to someone who's using AgendaHero. So I will personally reach out and, we have the automation, we have all that going, but like I will just randomly reach out to
mm.
people and thank them and see if I can get on a call or see if they can meet the team or see if I can meet them because that is more motivating than anything else is just actually meeting these strangers who are taking time out of their day to use this thing that you imagined. So anyways, my tip would be don't discount your idea. Go find your believers. They're
Mm.
out there and build with them.
That's brilliant, Caren. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. Super interesting, great expertise to share with everyone, especially those who are starting out and looking for pricing and packaging support. So we really appreciate your time here on GTM Expertise and look forward to chatting again soon. Thanks,
Thanks
Caren.
so much, Ben.